Thank you, Ron. It's my great pleasure today to welcome our speaker directly from Washington, D.C., United States Senator Roger Wicker. I also want to emphasize what Ron said. We're thrilled to have all of our guests from other clubs across Mississippi and West Tennessee today joining this call. In this new reality, it's hard sometimes to get everybody together, but Zoom works well, and we can have these type meetings, and we will have them for the short term. So thank you. Everybody's always welcome. With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, United States Senator Roger Wicker, who's been our senator since 2007. Before that, Senator Wicker was in the United States House from 95 to 07. A great Mississippian, a great senator. We're thrilled to have him. He's always welcome, an honorary member of our club, Deputy Whip. Senator Wicker, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you because I know that everybody's looking forward to hearing you, not me. So thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you all for having me. And I do believe this is my first civic club ever on video, and so thanks to Zoom, here we are. And I appreciate those of you joining in. I was going back through my notes, and I last spoke to the Tupelo Club on tax day of 2019, so April 15th, 2019. I would note that it's not yet tax day 2020. I guess it's middle of July or August or something. But I still haven't filed my taxes, but I hope the guy that helps me will get me the right date there. But I was looking at how much things have changed in a year or more. What was I talking to the Rotarians in North Mississippi about on April 15, 2019? I was discussing the tax, well, obviously it was tax day, so I was talking about the tax cut bill, which provided tax relief not only to all job creators and businesses, but also to every individual. 95% of all Americans who filed a tax return. I was talking about less federal regulation, whether that be regulation for the banks, regulations for inland small bodies of water, less regulation for the internet, things of that nature. And I was talking about federal judges, the confirmation of a lot of conservative federal judges with lifetime appointments. As a matter of fact, I hope either this week or next week we get our Fifth Circuit nominee, Corey Wilson, confirmed on the floor of the United States Senate. He was sent by the Judiciary Committee to the full Senate last Thursday. So we're looking forward to that and filling another couple of federal judge positions. We were talking about the border wall, the emergency funding, the unemployment rate. Anybody want to unmute and tell me what the unemployment rate was April 15th, 2019? Well, it was 3.8%. And then today, well, as of 10 days ago, the federal government released, or actually a surprisingly low unemployment rate, was 10 points higher than it was in April of 2019. The unemployment rate as of 10 days ago was 13.3%, and a lot of people really were relieved about that. And, we thought it might be up around 20%. Since basically the first of the year, we've had three very unusual and in many respects unpredictable crises. And of course, the first began during the impeachment inquiry in the House, which was the last part of last year. That culminated with a House vote to impeach the president on December 18 of last year. Now, Speaker Pelosi, for whatever reason, waited over 4 weeks to forward those impeachment articles over to the United States Senate. We received them January 16th of this year. The 3-week trial began January 21st of this year and concluded on February the 5th. I mentioned that as the first thing, not that it disrupted our economy or our social fabric, but it is so unusual to have a president impeached. So unusual. Only once ever, three times ever now in the history of our republic has the Senate actually sat in trial and done nothing else for 3 weeks but try the president of the United States to see if he should be removed. So crisis one was impeachment. And as I say, that ended on February 5th. Now, what did we start hearing about more and more just about that first week of February? We started hearing about this virus that had come probably from Wuhan, the Wuhan province in China, a place I had never heard of. It had spread to places in Asia, places in Southwest Asia, and to Italy and other places in Europe, and it was seemingly headed our way, and we started hearing about that really in January, but we started getting worried about it just about the time that the Senate found President Trump not guilty on February the 5th. Can any of y'all, I do love interaction. Who wants to remind me of when the stock market plummeted this year? Who wants to volunteer there?
Mid-March. It started in
Okay.
mid-March. We were at Disney World.
Okay, well, I went back and checked, and actually, if you'll go back, I think it was February 24th. And as I recall, I told my wife we've gotten some bad news over the weekend. I said, I think the stock market's going to go down 1,000 points next week. And as I recall, I've got some staff here checking the statistics. I think it went down 1,000 points the very next day, and then went on a huge tumble. That was late February, and then Congress began to realize that we needed to take action on the economy, and so we've had phase one, phase two, and phase three. Phase three being what we call the CARES Act. But for those of you who might want to be reminded, we passed phase one March 5th and 6th. Almost a unanimous bipartisan vote in the House and Senate for the staggering sum of $8.3 billion. Sent it to the president. Of course, he immediately signed it. Just to rehash recent history, it included emergency funding to treat and prevent the transmission, diagnostic testing, treatment for the virus, and some assistance to small businesses. That was phase one, March 5th and 6th, $8.3 billion. Then on March 14th, just days later, the president signed phase two. And it did not have so much of a price tag, but it provided for paid sick leave, free coronavirus testing, expanded unemployment, and some food assistance because we were beginning to experience food insecurity. And so it was about that time that Leader McConnell put together a task force to try to do a massive rescue program for our economy. So it was about after the passage of phase two that we realized we were going to have to take massive action there. And I was honored that he put me on a 3-person panel to deal with the airline industry, the aviation industry in general, also relief for the banking with regard to our banking laws, and also the Federal Reserve. So that was the portion of phase three, which we came to call the CARES Act, that I was intimately involved in. We passed that on, let's see, let me get this right. Well, the end of March. Let's say March 27th. I think that's the correct date. During the negotiations about the CARES Act, I remember sitting in trying to socially distance in meeting rooms over in the Capitol. And many of you know who Larry Kudlow is. He's a very conservative economist who was the president's economic advisor. And I remember early on in his discussions with our larger group, he said, don't be afraid to go big on this bill. We were talking then about $500 billion, an enormous sum. And Larry Kudlow, this fiscal hawk, this conservative who is very wary of federal spending, said, don't be afraid of the T word. And it occurred to me we were about to pass a bill in excess of $1 trillion. At the end of the day, we passed the CARES Act, which was phase 3 and is the law we're operating under largely now. $1.8 trillion, a staggering sum. And I think in terms of what we've done with regard to the airline industry, to some of these Federal Reserve programs that are loaning money that we hope to be paid back to a number of medium-sized and large industries, and then the very well-known Paycheck Protection Program. Those are the major aspects of this CARES Act phase 3. The discussion now is what we do next on the coronavirus. I do not believe, based on my discussions with the majority leader, that we will have a bill brought to the floor this month. I expect a phase 4 to be passed. I hope it's as bipartisan as it was for phase 3. In the Senate, it was unanimous. As you recall, in the U.S. House, they were going to pass it by a voice vote with a few members present. But there was one objection. So it was passed in the House with 1 or 2 dissenting votes. I hope it's as effective the one we pass mid to late July. And I hope we can do it by consensus on a bipartisan basis. I do not expect it will be nearly as expensive or massive as the CARES Act, but I do expect it to come. What do I think is going to be in it? I think we will try to fix a consequence that we saw coming on the unemployment insurance, where basically now everybody's talked about it. We thought it might just be some of the poorer states, but it's almost all of the states. There's a disincentive now to coming off unemployment and getting back to work. It's actually more beneficial to recipients and to their families if stay on unemployment if you get more money than if you come back to work. So we're going to have to do something about a back to work incentive and do away with that perverse disincentive to getting our economy going. I think we will. Let me see. We will work more on recovery rather than rescue, and I hope part of that is a massive infrastructure bill, highways, ports, things like that. Where once you spend the money, you have an asset at the end. And I hope we include military manufacturing, ships built in Mississippi, aircraft built in every one of our 50 states, with the supply chain for ships and military aircraft extends to all 50 states. And I think we will, again, try to massage the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, to make it work even better. That's what I expect to happen. Now let's talk about crisis number 3. And I was going back again. It's just hard to believe we've had this shelter in place, and sometimes we get disoriented on the time. The Ahmaud Arbery jogging incident where this young black man was shot while jogging unarmed in a largely white neighborhood took place on February 23rd. We didn't find out about it for quite a while. That happened on February 23rd. And then with the death and video on May 25th of George Floyd, really just only a few weeks ago, that brought about our third crisis. And it's a crisis that we're dealing with right now. And I'll tell you, this is one weekend I did not come home to Mississippi. And my wife Gail and I were visiting last night with our son and daughter-in-law and their baby in Washington, D.C. As we were driving home last night about 9 o'clock, we tried to get on the expressway, an interstate highway, and it was blocked off. The police had blocked it off. So we turned on the radio. We found out that a demonstration was being held on the interstate, on the expressway. Many of you who know something about Washington, D.C. know what the 14th Street Bridge is, one of the major arteries from Northern Virginia into Washington, D.C. There was a protest that had blocked the 14th Street Bridge. And so we had to go back around through Maryland across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge to get to our little condo last night. It would have, to me, it would have been a frightening thought if we had actually been on the bridge at the time that the protesters actually blocked off traffic there. So we are in the midst of a crisis still in Washington, D.C. My column last week mentioned that the National Guard from Mississippi, many of whom I know, were up here helping for a few days. They've been sent home now, but I just fear with the news out of Atlanta and other things that we're dealing with, we are not out of the woods yet, and we're struggling with what to do. Those of you who may have seen my report, my report that I sent out Friday, I've joined with Senator Tim Scott on his effort, and it may be that he'll be speaking on the floor of the Senate about it this week. But Tim Scott is an African-American Republican senator from South Carolina. And he has legislation aimed at training the police in diffusing situations, in de-escalation tactics, increasing accountability for officers, and reducing excessive force. I think I would hope that this legislation could garner strong bipartisan support based on the bipartisan effort of Senator Tim Scott. But it's a hard one. It's a hard one to address. Apparently, obviously, understandably, feelings are very, very high around the country, and so it's our third crisis. And I think it's going to complicate the COVID response. And we're just struggling with it here. But I'm glad that I have friends like Senator Tim Scott, who has an understanding of it that I couldn't possibly imagine. He himself, as a United States Senator, tells us that he frequently gets stopped for what he calls driving while black. It's something that those of us who haven't been part of that community can't imagine, but a United States Senator is a statewide elected official and should be a figure here on Capitol Hill, has had to endure that. So I sure don't know the answers, but I know we'll be struggling with it and dealing with it for some time now. So that's my report. Not the cheeriest visit I've ever had with Rotarians, but we continue to I continue to stay in my lane also, and that's Senator Cantwell from Washington, D.C., my ranking Democrat member on the Commerce Committee. She and I will be introducing either today or tomorrow a bipartisan airline safety bill intended after all these months to address the 737 MAX crashes, which we've had and which have been so devastating to our airline business. Also last week, the Armed Forces Committee, of which I'm a member, reported the National Defense Authorization Act. And again, both of those will be hugely bipartisan, scarcely a negative vote on the final version of the National Defense Bill coming out of committee last week. So at this point, thank you. And I don't know who's in charge, President Ashby or Vice President Sparks, but I'll be happy to take a question or two.
Senator Craig Ford did join us. Craig, do you have any questions for the senator? You'd have to unmute your bottom left button there. I think he's still on. Anyway, we recorded that too. Thank you.
I'd be glad to talk to him, but if this doesn't work, we can do it some other time.
Sure.
Any questions for Senator Wicker?
This is Randy McCoy. I do have one.
Okay.
I hear the president talk a good bit about China and the still unfair trade practices that China is imposing on the United States. Is Congress getting to the point where they're going to get more involved than just the action that's been taken by the president toward the Chinese?
We will do that, but the day-to-day actions we have given the president, whether that be a Barack Obama or a Donald Trump, the ability to be fast on his feet in that regard. When it comes to China, we benefit if we can get along on a fair basis. Americans like to sell things to the Chinese. They like to buy things from Chinese manufacturers and vice versa. So for the biggest economy in the world, it would be best if we could work these things out. That said, the manipulation of the currency, the stealing of intellectual property, the snooping on our conversation, the way they have implanted devices into the ZTE and Huawei equipment and things like that, are things that we have to address. They're not yet our military enemy, but they are a military adversary, and they're beefing up their fleet not only in the Pacific but around the world. They intend to stop our trade routes if they can, and we need to be mindful of that. Armed conflict, I don't think is in the cards. A fair playing field would be beneficial to both the United States, to the Chinese people as a whole, and also to international security. Who else?
Senator Wicker's Ron Ashby. Anything in the mill for the to bring the pharmaceutical industry back to the U.S.?
Absolutely, and it's probably an aspect that I should have mentioned with regard to China. Yes, the fact that they have become so undependable and so untrustworthy gives us a great opportunity to bring the pharmaceutical industry back to the United States and to protect our supply chain. So yes, we'll be doing that, and in many ways, the administration is equipped to do that without legislation, but I'm willing to work with the president on suggestions to make it more feasible. One thing we can do, we've got millions of American citizens who live on Puerto Rico we'd like to take some of the Chinese manufacturing jobs and move it back to the United States, including the 50 states and our Commonwealth in Puerto Rico, because those are Americans just like the rest of us. But yes, glad you brought that up. Do people raise hands or?
Senator Wicker, hey, it's David Sparks. They just had the election in Georgia, and I know it's too early, but hopefully this virus goes away to where the fall elections run smoothly. Is there talk in Washington about steps to take to make it safer for people to stand in line, or is that still just a little too far out at this point?
Well, of course, the great solution would be for us to open the economy back up and get people working again. We're going to be cautious about election laws. There may be some federal grants or things like that. But even at the presidential election, where the voters in all 50 of the states in the District of Columbia meet to elect basically presidential electors, we pretty much leave, and always have during the history of our country, specific election regulation up to the various states. So I want to be careful about a federal response that would nationalize this. For example, I would not be in favor of a federal law to say we vote by mail. Some states are comfortable with this, some states aren't. Some of our handicapped community is very fearful of mail-in because they feel like it will compromise their privacy and their secret ballot. I would rather discuss election laws at the state level. With regard to the long lines in Georgia, it's a concern. We haven't quite had that problem in a smaller state like Mississippi with just under 3 million voters, but that is a concern. I am glad we leave the coronavirus shelter in place regulations up to the states and generally speaking up to the state governments. And I think it's just fine for Georgia to have different regulations than Mississippi, a different treatment than Mississippi. And I think it's just fine for Manhattan to have a different approach than Little Rock, Arkansas. Well, let's see. Maybe we can take, I don't want to cut anybody off, but we can take one or two more. You want to take one more? The good thing about this format is you can just press that stop button. You don't have to get up and walk out of the room. So I guess I'll turn it back over to somebody there. Think you for having me. Test case there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Roger. I think I would comment on the, if you would, on the area of Seattle now that's no longer part of the United States there.
I think that's a bad idea to do that. You know, there's a frustration out there. There's no question about it. But we all depend on the police, and so this idea of defunding the police or having a police department free zone is absolutely unworkable and undesirable and absurd. And I think 95% of Americans would reject that. There are places in this world that don't have a strong police force. In those areas, somebody steps forward to maintain order. It might be the mob in some places, organized crime. They step forward and they do it. In Afghanistan, it's the Taliban when there isn't a police force. So somebody's going to do it. I would rather it be taxpayer funded policemen. There are things we can do to make things better. Training, a different mindset, but by and large, of course, the vast, overwhelming majority of our policemen are well-trained, make good decisions, and we're glad to have them. Yeah, it's amazing. And, you know, this happened a few years back in Wall Street. The Occupy Wall Street movement took a few weeks, and the police sort of stayed away from Wall Street. And finally, that went away. I hope this goes away in Seattle and other places.
Roger, Randy McCoy here once again. Just so you'll know, it's a wonderful perspective that we have of your office. But if you do this again, you might want to know that some of your staff can be seen in the mirror over your left shoulder. They do have their face coverings on, and that's a wonderful thing. But just so you'll know, we can see more in your office than just you.
That's true, yes. And have they been gasping in horror when I said something that they didn't like? I can see that now, yes.
I can't tell whether they were getting their face covering masks, what they are doing or thinking.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, Randy, thanks for mentioning masks. I actually wanted to show you my latest gift from my friend in Louisiana. This is a seersucker mask. Just great for summertime, and I'm told by Bill Cassidy from Louisiana that it was invented in New Orleans because of the heat. But thanks for that tip, Randy. Always appreciate it. This is not my first Zoom meeting, but it's the first time we've noticed the mirror there. Well, look, thank you, folks. I appreciate it. And maybe we can visit around the various clubs in person next time. Let's get America going again.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank you,
Roger.
sir.
Thanks for
All right,
being
bye-bye.
with us today. And I thank all of our guests for joining us today. We appreciate your being with us. Our next meeting will be next Monday, June 22nd. Dr. Carrie Wright, State Superintendent of Education, will be our speaker, and we look forward to having her. And again, thank y'all for joining us, and everyone be safe. And we will and don't forget also on Monday afternoon, the 22nd, we'll have our hamburger social at 5221 Cliff-Gookin Boulevard, and I hope to have a big crowd because we've got plenty of space for social distancing, and look forward to seeing a lot of you there and at that meeting. So without any further ado,
Ron, this is Raymond
David?
George. If anybody could send in how many people are going to be coming in your party, I would greatly appreciate it for food.
okay, good deal. Thank you. And I think you wanted that by Friday, did you not?
Preferred, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for everyone for showing up. And without anything else, we stand adjourned.